we are going to reconvene now, and we're going to hear from reports from each of the various groups in the breakout time. And we're going to spend just, a few minutes with each group. There are 7 of them. And I'm going to go in a random order just to mix it up. So if we could hear first from the group that talked about collaboration and new communities. Can we have a report from collaboration and new communities?
Okay, I got tapped to do that. So we had a great discussion, very rich. We actually got through all 4 goals, tremendous feedback, a number of good suggestions made for things that should be included in best practices for collaboration. Also noted that it's really important to look for collaboration in your community as well as and in the community around you, as well as with other congregations in your area. Great, and that sometimes, in fact, it was easier to collaborate with groups in your community. Great energy around the development of lay leadership, and a special call for support for senior wardens who are often in the hot seat and could use some help. That would be a good area around which to develop some best practices. Our 3rd goal had to do with the sustainability of new communities. And I think it was agreed that collaboration was really essential in the beginning of new communities, but sustainability was not just a financial thing. It also had to do with development of a leadership structure and sustainability of a leadership structure. And that it was important to provide enough resources up front, and that a director of development would be helpful. And then finally, on the 4th goal, which had to do with new communities, particularly in the Latin community and the African American community, it was pointed out that one of the things that needs to happen first is that we need to develop clergy and lay leadership resources in those communities to help with their sustainability, because we may not currently have the infrastructure to do that and do that well.
Outstanding. Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you to everyone in that group. Sounds like a really lively, rich, and full conversation.
And thank you to Ernest, who led us through it.
Thank you, Ernest, as well. All right, next we're going to jump to Lifelong Christian Formation. Can we hear a report from that breakout group, Lifelong Christian Formation?
Yes, Bishop, this is Amy Campbell. Be happy to
Amy.
share. So we had really good conversation talking about trying to boil it down to some really key points about what we should be looking at. Folks felt like racial reconciliation was top of our list. There was a lot of passion and a lot of energy behind that. And some specifics was really making sure that we're talking to our communities of color, finding out what they want and need. So we can't be a one-size-fits-all type of formation offering. We really need to look at different communities and figure out what they need. We talked about respecting the dignity of all, and that included several different populations, so communities of color, LGBTQIA+ members of that community, the older folks of our congregations and the elder members, really trying to figure out ways to include each and every person and each and every group, and figuring out what those groups need. We ended our conversation with a talk about communication, and some folks brought up that of course, not every congregation has all of the abilities that others do. Some are without internet. And so they need different ways of us communicating with them. And so figuring out and targeting our ways of communicating with different groups and figuring out how best can we serve each congregation or each community, and making sure that we're reaching out to them in the way that is best for them. We talked a little bit about contemplative practices and how that might be included. That would give us a grounding to do the work of racial reconciliation.
Fantastic, thank you. Just in case you're wondering, not only are all these reports being recorded, so we won't lose these summaries, but the data that was gathered by your leaders is going to come to the mission strategy team as they continue with this process and to build out that work. So following Amy's lead, let's go next to racial justice and reconciliation. Can we have a report from one of those conveners?
Yes, this is Sally.
Hey, Sally.
We needed another hour because we had great conversation going on and actually did not complete all of our formal presentation because we had such robust discussion. But the things that we talked about were looking back at the academic value of looking back at histories of churches, collaboration, I took notes in about 4 different places. One of the big points that we talked about was the digital divide, especially in Black and Latinx communities. One of the people in the group is actually a district court judge, and he has asked the social workers in his purview where the internet is available and where it is not available. So to me, this would be a great project for the churches and the diocese to advocate for an expansion of internet access, because that is going to be critical as we continue to move forward. And if you've already got a racial barrier and a language issue, if you can't get on the internet, you're really, and this could be a great statewide project, in my opinion. And then one thing that came to me while I was listening to some of the other reports, one thing I think we have to be very cautious about is to make sure that we follow the example of Christ's Beloved Community, St. Cyprian's in Oxford, and Church of the Holy Spirit in Greensboro, where they went out into the neighborhoods to see what the people in the neighborhoods needed, rather than sitting in an office somewhere and deciding what their community needed. So that's just something we need to really be cautious about.
Thank you, Sally. Tremendously important. And that's actually, you may have seen that point is being made in the chat box as well by Lori Special and Daniel Robayo in terms of agency.
Right.
Thank you. Let's go next to congregational support. Can we hear from that group, congregational support?
That would be Jamon Taylor and me. And so, yes, we also had a very interesting and helpful conversation. We did look at the goals that have already been developed, recognizing though that they were all developed before COVID, and that changes. And when you're thinking about strengths and vulnerability, definitely COVID has added some challenges to some parishes, probably all parishes, related to how you maintain contact with different groups based on their who's into computers and electronics and who isn't, but also a whole lot of excitement and energy around some new initiatives, mostly electronic based, but also telephone calls and new kinds of contacts with people that have really been surprisingly effective with parishes getting attendance at their electronic services more than they have previously had, and visitors from all over the world have found them. And so, so just in thinking about what energy can be put into what happens as we move back to in-person, how to hold on to the good things and the energizing things that have happened during this time. We need to not be doing deficit thinking. And right now we're saying vulnerable parishes. In some ways we're all vulnerable, but also people don't want to be labeled vulnerable. We need to be thinking of other terminology to use. And we did not decide on that, but we do need parishes, congregations don't want to be called vulnerable. That's a pretty scary word. So we just need to think of that. But this is not the time for woe is me. It's the time for the can-do, life-giving spirit that we can develop. We need to be thinking about things as like, what does it mean to be the body of Christ? And how do we pull that into our thinking in a theological way? So Jaman wanted me to do this report because he said I was obviously taking copious notes. I did take notes, and they will be available to the mission strategy team. Fortunately for you all, I did not read them word for word.
Thank you, Sue. Great, lots of good meaty substance there for us to work with. Let's go next to direct services, direct service.
I'm going to give that report. We had a really small group gathered. And I know many of you are involved in direct services, and it would have been good to hear the variety of work that's going on across the diocese. But what we've realized is that especially during COVID, direct services kind of crosses inside and outside of the parish, that there are needs inside of the parish. There are people who've lost their jobs. There are people who are hungry inside of the congregation. And so we spent some time talking about what a direct service actually is. We even couldn't come up with a definition because there was such a broad bucket that people imagined when they thought of direct services. But we did kind of settle on that it is acts of mercy for all comers, anybody who comes, if it's a member of the parish, if it's a member from outside the parish, if it's someone we've met before, a stranger, that it's an act of mercy. What we realized is during COVID, what we're really missing is being with people, that we're doing a lot of doing for people, but we are missing being with. And that there's a big burnout with that. There's
I've just been turning it on and like leaving it.
And, an energy sap in not being able to actually be with the people that you're working with. Instead of sitting down and eating lunch with people, we're doing grab and go meals, across the state, and that just doesn't have the same. It just needs a different kind of energy to keep it going. We do believe that direct services actually touches all of the strategic goals in one way or another. That bringing up youth in direct service work is part of formation, that direct services touches creation care, racial reconciliation, congregational support, and cooperative ministry, that direct services would be involved with all of those goals. And we also realized that asset mapping was a big part of this, and that now as different parishes are stepping into ministry that they're maybe dabbling in during COVID especially, to go ahead and name it and elevate it. It doesn't have to be perfect yet, to be offered as an asset and as a model for other people to use, whether it's caring for elderly people in nursing homes during COVID, the creative ways that you're finding to do that, or ways you're feeding people or supporting remote education for school students, whatever it is that you're doing, to not wait for it to be perfect, to elevate it and name it as an asset, that the model can be shared with other people, and people can learn from what you have experienced. We also realized that some of the historic collaborations, historic churches who've started soup kitchens 50 years ago and have spun them off into other nonprofit organizations, that the church needs to remember that that is their work as well, and to claim those as part of their history, and to celebrate their work, and maybe setting ministries free to do their own thing, and still being part of God's work from your parish. So thank you.
Thank you, Tony, for all of that, and especially paying attention to the assets of the community, to not be afraid of trial and error, all of which you've been living into in your leadership at Galilee. So thank you for that. Two groups left. Let's hear from Creation Care next.
That's me. Hello, everyone. I'm David McDuffie. I'm the chair of the Environmental Ministry Committee. And thank you very much, Bishop Rodman, for allowing us to be here to share. We had really appreciate the opportunity, and just had a really wonderful and rewarding conversation in our group. We went through our priorities as a committee, which to be brief, are reaching out, making congregational connections, and how important this is. Not only us reaching out to you, but everyone out there reaching out to us, so that we can know some of the wonderful work that you're doing in protecting God's creation, because we know that there's a lot that goes on in the diocese, and some of which we know about and some of which we don't. We also outlined some of our programs related to energy, to food and agriculture, to water conservation, and to advocacy work that many in our committee are taking part of, and explored some opportunities for how upcoming opportunities that will be coming up very soon, as well as some things that will be on the horizon that we have our eyes on moving forward in terms of engaging with bringing the gospel message to the legislative process. And really what came out of our chat was that there's just a wonderful diversity of ways to engage in environmental ministry. So we had some wonderful sharing ideas from those in our group that range from really being intentional about addressing the issues of food waste, even when we're providing food for others. Are we doing that in terms of a sustainable way? What types of garbage are we producing? Is it compostable, and so forth and so on? Issues such as green burial, how to use our natural spaces on our campuses that many of our congregations in our diocese are really blessed with. And a lot of times there are questions about, we have this space, what do we do with it? And so we had a lovely conversation about sometimes there are things that you can actively do, such as implement a community garden that can feed not only your congregation, but the local community. And then there are other ways that you can allow God's creation to be God's creation, to provide a conservation habitat, to provide things such as nature trails, advocate for native tree planting and preservation. And also a very important point that came up is to make these accessible, to make those accessible for all in terms of handicap accessible, so that no one will be cut off from accessing these wonderful natural areas that many of our campuses are blessed with. And another thing that we continue to come around to is starting small. Start where you are. Thinking about God's creation in all of the decisions that we make, both big decisions and small decisions. As we frequently do as congregations, we're making decisions, sometimes very mundane, sometimes not so mundane. Sometimes they involve hundreds of dollars, sometimes they involve thousands of dollars. But thinking about the idea that what we do and the gospel message is connected up with our care for and our appreciation for God's creation is a very important thing. So it doesn't mean saving the world. Big goals are important, but starting where we are in our congregations and doing what we can really allows everyone to be involved in this wonderful ministry of environmental ministry. And really, I think our overall message that we took away from this, and I thank all of those who came for sharing and for bringing this to us all is that environmental ministry is vital to the gospel message. It's essential to who we are as Episcopalians, and really that it's essentially environmental ministry is essentially sacramental. It connects up with what we do in our formal liturgies of the church. And now that we're doing liturgies outside more, we've made that a little bit more explicit. And so there are all kinds of opportunities that are there, but really pointing out that what we do and what we all can do in terms of environmental ministry doesn't need to be seen as something that's done extra. It can be seen at the very core and the heart of the gospel message itself. And so the final message that I think came out of everything is that we're here as a committee to help all of you to make these connections, but we also want to hear from you. We want to hear what you are doing, and we want to hear suggestions going forward of ways that we can better promote environmental ministry and to highlight environmental ministry in our diocese. And therefore, that means maintaining lines of communication, and we're always receptive to your suggestions. And this session was very much showed that there were so many wonderful things that came out of this, some of which we had really thought about, and some new things even to us who think about this a lot. So thanks again for the opportunity. One last thing that I would like to say is that one of our programs that we are engaging in, particularly in this time of COVID, is our Green Grant program. And it is usually tailored towards smaller congregations who are looking to start environmental ministry. So this is one other way that we can engage right now in these strange times of providing congregations a little bit of money to get started with a project that they may have in mind. So we're very much still promoting that. We still have some grant funds available going forward for the rest of the year. So thanks again, and I look forward to hearing from many of you, and thank you from all of us on the committee for the opportunity to be here and to share.
David, thanks so much to you and Carl, and for all the opportunities, the ways that we can engage, and particularly the reminder not to be afraid to start small. And don't forget, as David said, about the Green Grant opportunities that are still available. We're going to begin where we started today, and that's with innovative worship.
Hi, Jacob Pierce here. I'm going to present for our group, and I want to thank Lisa Fishbeck for leading such a rich conversation from a wide variety of folks throughout the diocese. And I can't possibly cover everything that we talked about, but some highlights. We started with what folks were missing the most about in-person worship, or really, I want to say worship before the pandemic. And the things that were mentioned the most was physical connection and touch, particularly around the peace, having communion together, being able to sing together. It was also mentioned how difficult it is to lead bilingual liturgy, bilingual liturgy online. That can be a difficult task. But then we talked about what folks are doing in their own context, and we heard a lot about the use of Facebook Live and Zoom, YouTube, as well as Vimeo and other ways to stream a service, some that are interactive and more that is interactive maybe only through the comment section. Folks also shared creative ways that they have distributed the sacrament or administered Eucharist with approval from our bishop. And then there was also interest in further conversation about virtual consecration and how that conversation is taking shape in the House of Bishops at the national level. But folks are also talked about how they have had parishioners share art. There's been creative ways to share in their worship, music and singing together. Audra Apt at Holy Spirit in Greensboro shared how her congregation has learned to share the peace through American Sign Language. She might want to show us that, Bishop, if you would permit her to do so. But that would be a great bridge builder as we get on to the maybe towards the end of the pandemic, where we might be in person but won't be touching one another. Folks also talked about neighborhood church and community groups that they have in their own neighborhoods. And then there was conversation about Advent and Christmas and an opportunity to try some new things and what people are coming up with for ways to do Advent and Christmas at home, to give resources for families, and what children's pageants might look like. For the mission strategy, what we would like to add to the mission strategy is really two things: how we can support and engage members of our congregations who do not have access to technology, and what are the ways to engage them, and then what does it look like when we move to a hybrid approach? What does online church look like beyond the pandemic? So those were two things that we would like to add to the mission strategy. And now that's all I have, but I thought, if Bishop, if you'll allow it, Audra, if you want to teach if she's here, teach the whole diocese how to share the piece.
Sure.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's great. One of my the members of Holy Spirit found it on YouTube. Another church was teaching everybody, so we learned it from YouTube too. So I'm happy to share. I'm going to stand back so you can see a little more. So sign language isn't like a, I don't know, direct translation. So I'll tell you what each signal means. So we start with our right hand X'd on top of our left hand to make an X. And the sign for to become or to transform is to just shift your hand so that your left hand is now on top of your right hand in the X. So start with right hand on top. So we're going to say, may you become. And then peaceful or tranquil, the sign is you start with your hands in a tent and you sweep them down as if you're just brushing the wind or brushing the water back. So we're going to become tranquil, and they're going to flow together, right hand on top of left. And as you become, you then go into your tent and you become tranquil. So that's one. And in Spanish, it's que seamos en la paz. And then with you all goes like this. So with is put your fists together with your thumbs side by side. You all, you just open your hands and extend your hands to everybody on the screen. So with you, con ustedes. And so we can do this all together now, right? Right hand on top of left, la mano derecha, encima de la mano izquierda. Okay. Que seamos en la paz, que la paz esté con ustedes. May we be in peace, and may that peace be with you. And then how you say also with you is you make sign language for why, but then you turn your thumb towards your mouth and then you go like this. That means, and also with you, more or less. Do you want to do it one more time? Okay. Right hand on top of left. And there you have it. This has been really helpful as we've done kind of front yard Eucharist, and we've experimented with a little bit of in-person. When we all have the impulse to go in and hug each other, we have this other thing that we're doing with our bodies that we've already learned. So it's helped to fill that yearning and that gap while staying safe. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Peace be with you.
And also with you. That was awesome. Thank you, Jacob and Lisa. And Audra, I'm going to invite you back for the very last thing at the end of our closing prayers, if you would lead us again in the peace.